Hello. Here again with a very important concept in the context of human-machine systems and social technical systems and systems theories in general. Today is the concept of homeostasis. I'm just going to go through it very briefly. And this is actually inspired by the work of Walter Cannon in the early 20th century. He wrote a book called The Wisdom of the Body, published in 1932, which introduced this concept of homeostasis. So homeostasis is a fundamental concept in biology, and it refers to the ability of an organism or a system to maintain a stable internal environment despite changes in the external environment. So you have an organism, a body of organization, and this body of organization is embodied in the context of an environment, of an external environment. So think of the human body. We're part of this larger external environment. And when the conditions of the external environment changes, the internal organization, the internal functioning and mechanisms within the biological organism has a way of adapting itself, of adjusting its internal functioning so that it achieves a new state, it changes its internal state according to the conditions of the environment, so that it reaches a balanced state in relation to the conditions of the external environment. So in Cannon's definition, homeostasis is the coordinated physiological processes which maintain most of the steady states in the organism. So this stability is essential for the proper functioning of cells, tissues, and organs within an organism. And it ensures that conditions like temperature, pH, nutrient levels, and other physiological variables remain within a narrow range that is conducive to the organism's survival and optimal functioning, of course, in relation to that environment. So homeostasis involves many control mechanisms, internal control mechanisms that work together to regulate different aspects of the internal environment, the internal system. And these control mechanisms, they rely on feedback loops where the system adjusts itself so that it returns to an ideal set point for its proper organizational functioning. So now we introduced a new concept, which is the concept of feedback loops. Feedback loops is, deserves a discussion on itself. It's also a very fundamental concept in systems theories, but it pretty much is this kind of information exchange between two entities. So you have the system, the biological organization, the body, and you have the environment. And this is an open system relationship. So the world is an open system. So the body will exchange information with the environment. It will receive back information from the environment. And that feedback loop, constant feedback loop, is what drives the internal regulation, the internal changes in the internal mechanisms, so that it stabilizes itself in relation to the environment. So homeostasis operates at multiple levels within an organism. And that means the multiple level means different scales of organization. So you have the cell, then you have tissue, then you have organs, then you have specific systems within the body, and then you have the organization itself, the body itself. And then the body itself is also a smaller system within a larger context, systemic context, that includes other entities in the environment. And as we advance in systems theories and social technical systems understanding, we'll see that several entities, several systems form a multi-scale organization. So in short, homeostasis is, so summarizing, homeostasis is the body's way of maintaining a stable internal environment through the different control mechanisms, internal control mechanisms, and which are which are coordinated, not coordinated, but they rely on these feedback loops, on this information exchange between the different entities, the different subsystems, and with the different entities within that environment. It is a crucial aspect of biological systems. So homeostasis is fundamental to the living systems. And it's what allows organisms to survive and to maintain itself in the constant changing conditions of the environment. So in terms of the human body, a very simple way to understand how this adaptation, this internal adaptation happens in regulation and going back to a stabilized state is the body has a medium, an average temperature, internal temperature. And when you're in a room with an air conditioning, your body is functioning in a way that the internal temperature is maintained in relation to the colder temperature in the room. But then as soon as you leave that room out in the world, where it's, on a summer day and it's really hot, the temperature outside in the environment changes drastically. So the body has to change to adapt its internal function, its internal processes to that new condition of the environment. So when you're inside of the room, the internal systems, the system of the body is keeping up that temperature. So it has to, increase the temperature because the temperature in the environment is colder. And then when you go outside and the temperature is a bit hotter, then the internal organism, the organism itself, no longer needs to be keeping up with the temperature, with the colder temperature. So it lowers down its internal mechanism so that it readapts that temperature to its ideal condition for that organism to maintain itself, to stay stabilized in relationship to the environment. I hope that this was clear, but the book Wisdom of the Body was what introduced the terminology. So it was what introduced the concept of homeostasis. And this was very fundamental to the development of systems thinking, systems theories all throughout the 20th century, but particularly in the cybernetics project throughout the late 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s, and then it remained up to this day, where feedback loop, this idea that a system adapts to the conditions of the environment based on those feedback loops, was essentially the very core concept of all of the discussions that were led within the cybernetics project, which was, in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I think this is enough for a concept. If any questions, just hit in the comments, and I'm happy to discuss. So this is a very nice book to read. It's quite easy. It's interesting. He also makes this analogy of the organism with society. So how regulation happens within the human body and how it happens within society. That is a very interesting point for social technical systems. So I say this is a very fundamental literature for social technical systems studies. All right, That's it for today. Thank you.